Howdy, of you delicious people. I'm here today to review the Boondock Saints. So, I would say overall, this is a fun movie, but somebody might find this movie offensive also. There's like a dirty joke in this movie. There is maybe some content here or there that may not like be an enjoyable thing for everyone. But I just find this movie to be fun. I honestly feel that like this movie goes about people going through and like killing people a bulk of the time by just pure accident, or really there is just these like coincidental setups that just pan or work out. Really, I just enjoy Willem Dafoe's character, even though sometimes he might feel offensive at some points in time here or there. In all honesty, for this movie, I don't enjoy at some points in this movie where both Connor and Murphy are to like around these cops just be like, man, you guys are like the bestest ever. Like, man, you guys are like Superman. Like, we should go and get you guys capes for how great that you are. Like, that's the only thing that I don't like about this movie is kind of the kind of the shoe licking at some points that these guys are to go and do with Connor and Murphy, because really both Connor and Murphy could have just turned around and just said, hey, like, but you guys do great work. Like, I wish they could have like turned it around and just be like, well, hey, like, we just did this one thing, but you guys are the real like heroes of it all. And I think that's what like it probably gets lost back then or whenever, like 1999, like not that far, but like now in like movies like God, what is it, like Hancock, the Will Smith movie, like they like prominently like thank the police officers and whatever, but eventually Will Smith is to do his thing, and so like now we've gotten into that territory, whereas before, like all that mattered is like, hey, we gotta butter up this main character and make him like seem like everybody's like, yeah, like he's doing a good job. Like a lot of like the Batman movies where like you get a lot of like the Commissioner Gordons and all those people are just like, yeah, Batman, we couldn't have done it without you, and like and Batman is like, I guess so. Like, man, I'm just doing my thing. So Bizarrish glare. Let's take these off. I just get migraines eventually with like lighting and whatever, but let's take those off. So, uh, here are the things that are to play out in this movie to just kind of tee it up. Some people might know an adult star called Ron Jeremy, and he's in this film. May not be the most savory character, but I find him fun to be in this film, um, as well as a number of other people. We get Rocco, that is to be this like very fly off the handle kind of guy compared to Connor and Murphy that seem to have a plan of things, or are to seem to be here to have fun and make fun of other people. And like they're just having a fun like time in their lives. But anyways, yeah, so but there is just some weird wonky like lines that are to be delivered in here where like especially when like the detectives are talking to both Connor and Murphy about them maybe like spending the night in prison. Like, oh, can they Paul Smecker? Smecker? That's DeVoe's name in this movie? Smecker? Man, that sounds awful, but anyways, hey, like frickin' if anybody can get some kind of like main focus in a movie, then by golly. So And Paul is looking at this police officer to like, yeah, well, I guess if you go and call their moms, like, I'm sure they'll say yes, and then they can spend the night. And like that, like goofy kind of thing that happens in this movie, where like Willem Dafoe is kind of like playing the mother of this precinct, but eventually we'll find out that Willem Dafoe is going in to eventually be in disguise at some point in this movie. Um, but yeah, so kind of teeing up this movie, here is what is to happen. So, uh, Connor and Murphy seem to be two brothers at the right place at the right time, but it leads to both having Connor and Murphy going and killing some people, which lands them into this police department, but eventually just lands them to be heroes. And all of a sudden they decide, well, heck, like, we're gonna go and take this like on the road and start like killing and murdering people pretty much mostly by accident. And then they're just like, hey man, like, how about we just go and just start killing people? How about we just go and like we just start killing a lot of bad guys? And whether or not they make money out of this whole thing, like, that's like a mood point. It's just like, hey man, let's just keep wiping out these bad guys. And like it gets to a point in this movie where there's going to be some dialogue, which I'm not going to get into, especially when we get to the way of which that both Connor and Murphy eventually have this one like Despiritu Santos kind of thing. Like, I'm not going to go through all of that. Plus, also, there's this big thing of dialogue that eventually both Connor and Murphy and eventually another person go into towards the end of this film to just kind of like mention like their like declaration of this is what we're going to do kind of thing. And they go into this long spout, and it seems like a lot of this stuff all sounds like it's like rhyming and like connected and whichever. And like, I don't know if that was on purpose to like try to help these guys be able to like get this dialogue out. But like it's just this long stretch of dialogue where they're to like mention this whole like their whole like statement of what they're wanting to do in the future, which is basically just going to be 10 years from now, because the sequel of the Boondock Saints 2 doesn't happen until like a decade from when they made the original. So a lot of people are always just like, man, like, I wish they could make another Boondock Saints movie. And yeah, that would be great, but it always takes like 10 years for them to make another one. So yeah, like, I don't know if there's ever going to be another one, another Boondock Saints, just because I think that Norman Reedus is tied up with a lot of things. I just saw recently Sean Patrick, who was in Born a Champion. I saw that film with Dennis Quaid, and so I saw that film, and so immediately, like, I went back to just going like, okay, maybe I'll go into doing the Boondock Saints because I saw that film. And so yeah, go ahead and check out Born a Champion if you want to go and check out that review or whatever. But yeah, you can do whatever you want. Or check out any Norman Reedus movie like Air. Go ahead and check that out with DeJaiman. Like, that was actually a fun movie. More than likely, I might want to just re-review that film because I reviewed it at some point, but I'm gonna have to like re-review it. I thought that was movie good enough to have to review. Like, probably could be a one movie that no one will probably care about, and it'll just be another zero thing. But I like this movie. I like the movie. I like the movie. So, anyways, so yeah, people dying. There's sometimes where you're gonna see some chest of a woman in this film, so that's great. But yeah, other than that, pretty fun film. like I enjoy the accidental death of a number of people. And I also like the fact that we have Paul, who is Willem Dafoe in this movie, who is to showcase to us how exactly all of these people die. Because Dafoe is the explanation for how everyone is to die in this movie. And there are some scenes that they didn't show that Dafoe is to explain, and that's what just kind of makes him like better than all these other detectives, because any of the other detectives like Greenlee are to just kind of like say like, oh, I felt like they just killed one another, like that's how I feel, like this is all set up. Paul is just like, please, like I'm gonna come in here and I'm gonna immediately just tell you how this all broke down bizarrely, and it'll have worked perfectly to what had actually happened. So, with that said, let's go and hopefully break this down in a way of which that this movie had actually happened, because eventually it will. So, let's go into spoiler territory, because it is about that time to go into spoiler time. Spoiler time. It's about that time to spoil this movie. So, very beginning of this film, we have both Connor and Murphy who are going to a church. So they leave a church to go to the bar, and so the bar owner, who I don't think I have a picture of here, um, yeah, is to basically have this way about talking that doesn't seem all quite right, where consistently this guy is to mention like make like a tree and get the out of here. And so like there's so many times when like the way of which that this guy has to trickle things out are is incorrect or whichever, to where Rocco is just like, you know what, I'm gonna get you like a book so that we can try to like figure all this out. Like I don't remember what exact book it was, but anyways, so they start busting out like all the things that this guy would it'll pronounce and whichever. Uh, but this is to lead us to the uh, bar owner mentioning that he has a week before the Russians are going to take his bar. But Ivan is to come in. Ivan Chekhov is to come in with these two other guys and just say, well, you know what? Like, I'm gonna take this bar now. I'm gonna clean house now. I want this bar. And so Connor Murphy are just like, well, hey, buddy. Like, if anything, we still have to like the end of the week, and like, hey, man, like, how about you come in here and we'll all just be Irish. Like, even if you're not Irish, like, you'll all be Irish now. So what ends up happening to just kind of escalate this is bar fight is to break out. Murphy is to mention how like, hey man, if we just had one more person, we can like we can play hockey or we can play whatever. So, but anyways, it goes into a fight out, which eventually leads to us seeing a number of dead bodies that are to be lined up for these police detectives to try to figure out what it all happened. And so, of course, we have Greenlee, who is to bizarrely make up this story that makes no lick of sense. How, like, I guess supposedly all of these guys had kind of just done them all selves in. And Paul is just like, please, like, if anything, Greenlee, go and get me a sandwich. Go get me a whatever. And so Paul goes and is to consistently get headphones on and listen to classical music. and is to figure out what it all happened. So, what actually had happened was during this fight, Ivan had gone onto the bar and lit his back end on fire. And so so both Connor and Murphy had like easily just taken these guys out, just wiped them all out. But eventually, Ivan, with his guys, eventually got upset that Connor and Murphy had gotten the best of them. So Ivan goes to find where Connor and Murphy are resting their heads, which is at this like place where it seems like they don't even have a real true bed. It's just like mattresses that are on the ground. So, and this place honestly just looks like a hole, but it is what it is. So, Ivan is to grab, Ivan is to grab Murphy and cuff Connor to this toilet. So they're grabbing Murphy to take him outside. So all of a sudden we have Connor, who is getting to have this absurd strength and is going to rip this toilet from off of the ground and is taking this toilet onto the rooftop to go and chuck this toilet onto Ivan to where the impact, I guess, kills him quickly. And Connor is to jump from off of this rooftop to fall on some other guy, which is to, I guess, because of impact, maybe like, but they eventually just shoot, I think, the rest of the guys, and I think one of the guys shoots another guy by accident, but eventually that is to lead to all of these people's deaths, and eventually Paul is to explain all this, but not know who exactly like the guys who were to have gotten away from this, who they actually are. So the detectives are going back to the precinct and they're like, well, yeah, I guess we're never going to find these guys. Like, it's basically going to be a needle in the haystack. Like, they are probably going to go out of their way to just, like, scram out of here and we're never going to hear them again. And so both Connor and Murphy are to make it to the hospital after they've been beaten up. And so the news is to cover both Connor and Murphy, and so they're like, well, hey man, I guess that we should just go to like the police department. If anything, like we'll just tell them it was self-defense because that's actually the truth, and like we should be fine. And so they decide to go to the police department because it's the right thing. And so both Connor and Murphy are in these, of course, robes because like they didn't actually like they just kind of got out of their clothes and eventually got attacked by Ivan and his men. So Connor and Murphy make their way to the police department, and Greenlee is mentioning like, hey, we're gonna need like something to just kind of like sniff them out. And Murphy is just like, well, hey, maybe you just need a beer, and then we'll come a running. And they're like, oh crap, like these must be the guys. So Paul goes and takes them and interrogates them. And consistently throughout this, we have Connor and Murphy who are speaking in a different language to just kind of ask one another, like, well, should we mention to him about this? Like, should we mention to him about the gun? Should we mention him about this or that and whatever and what have you? So Paul is to eventually go like, whoa, it seems like you guys know a number of like different languages. And Murphy and Connor are like, yeah, we do. Like we know a bunch of stuff. To I guess eventually when they need to eventually have to work with somebody or whatever, that they'll be able to like talk in a number of different kind of languages. So like we have where Paul, Connor, and Murphy are kind of having this like dialogue in different language with one another, and like Paul is just kind of mentioning like, yeah, like a lot of people like probably wouldn't come forward like you guys did. A lot of people wouldn't have done that, and so both Connor and Murphy are just like, hey, like, because Paul to or the other detectives to these two guys are basically heroes, and like Connor Murphy are just like, hey man, like we had to do what we did. Like it wasn't like it was just self defense, and it was just like a thing that we thought that we had to do. So, but if anything, these guys were really like slime balls, and so like these like all these police department is just like, hey man, like you should be working with us. Like if anything, like you guys are just like really great, and like so on and so off. Like it's kind of funny to see like Sean Patrick and like Norman Reedus like doing this because this is one of those like early things that they did. Then eventually, like Norman Reedus did like The Walking Dead and like how that like skyrocketed off. But anyways, so there's a lot of de-polishing for both Connor and Murphy in this moment, but and so the police officers are to like eventually ask Paul if both Connor and Murphy can sleep at the police precinct because both Connor and Murphy need a real solid bed, and more than likely they're gonna find that here. So and so Paul is to mention like, well, if you go and you call their parents and like they're okay with it, then I'm sure both of these guys can stay the night. Like as a mom, kind of going like, oh, like I guess I have to decipher whether or not these kids can stay the night at this prison. Like I'm sure like the beds aren't that great, but whatever. So the very next day, Connor is to eventually call a friend of his to mention that there are to be some people at this plaza. And kind of this whole dress and all this thing, Connor's writing it down and just kind of like, okay, all right. So, Rocco. So, Rocco is to be forced to go and meet with two men. One of them is to be Ron Jeremy's character, who is uh, Vencizo. Vin, Vincizo Lipazzi, and the other is to be Iacovetti. So Rocco is to go and see these two men, and so the consistent thing is that Rocco is supposed to be some funny guy. Like I was just kind of waiting for the Joe Pesci moment where they're like, "Well, so what am I, a clown? Do I amuse you?" Like I thought that moment was coming, but we didn't have it. So Iacovetti is going and eating his sandwich and just like, okay, Rocco, like, give me a joke. And so Rocco, of course, is to give this dirty joke that is to be about three different skin-toned guys that are to ask a a genie for something. And the very last tail end of this is that there is to be a white guy that is to say, well, both of those two other guys are like freaking away, then just like I would like to have a Coke. And so they're laughing it out because it's like, oh, I'll have a Coke. That's hilarious. And then so Iacovetti is like, well, give me another joke. And so because this guy is supposed to be funny guy, and so And I guess since Rocco isn't like pressured, like he just can't deliver, he's not funny because sometimes it just doesn't happen that way. Booga booga booga, funny. Anyways, so Rocco is to be forced to have to go and kill the exact same people that both Connor and Murphy are to have to kill. And so both Connor and Murphy are to go to this one hotel room to kill this guy that they call the Fat Man. So both Connor and Murphy are to go to this man who's to have all these kinds of weapons. And so bizarrely, Connor is to mention, like, hey man, like, we need a thing of rope. And Murphy's like, why do we need rope? And Connor is like, well, because I've seen a number of action movies and I always see that they have like this thing of rope. And so we gotta have rope too. So, like, the most hilarious moment is when Murphy is mentioning that he's sweating his balls off because he's carrying this like 30-pound thing of rope that they were to have. And so, like, while they're trying to figure out where the heck they're going also. So, they get all the stuff that they are to go after these men, and so Connor and Murphy are to go not through quickly a door, but they are to go through this ventilation shaft because that's the traditional way to do things in movies, to just go through ventilation shafts of so many things. So Connor Murphy go through and eventually crash through the wall to make it into this room to kill all these guys. And they're like spinning, like they're spinning in rotation, just firing upon every single one of these men. And like they have like ski masks on, and they're like dangling from the sky, or dangling from the ventilation shaft because of all this rope that they had. Luckily that they did have. And so both Connor and Murphy are decking all of these guys, and eventually there is one that was to be saved for last, that both Connor and Murphy are to give this guy like his last rites and to pop him in the back of the head, with how we kind of see here. So both Connor and Murphy are to have one normal target that they are to kill in this manner, and to just kind of send them on their way to their afterlife. They're to also give like pennies to like the eyes, to have it be that this is going to be the toll that they are to give to the guy, the Reaper or the whoever, to transition them on to where they're going to go next, which is either hell or heaven or whichever, if they kind of eventually made amends at the tail end of their lives or whatever. But anyways, so that leads to Rocco making it into this hotel room, and Connor and Murphy are to realize that Rocco is now making his way here, like disguising himself as some room service. So Connor and Murphy are like, yeah, we're gonna mess with him. So Rocco comes in, they grab him, and I guess his name is like Jafar. And so they take him, they grab him, and like they basically like threaten him that, hey, we're gonna kill you because you saw us, and like ba 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 ba. So Rocco is just like, man, you guys killed a lot of these guys. There's a lot of them here. And so Connor and Murphy are just like, well, hey, like, what gun do you have? like Rocco, and so they take it and they realize that it's a six shooter, and there's nine guys here, and so Connor is like, well, wait a minute, you funny man, like what would have you have done like after you ran out of bullets? Were you just gonna laugh them to death after that? Like were you just gonna like make them laugh so hard they die? Like what was your gonna be your plan? And so Rocco had mentioned, well, maybe what I was gonna do is like I was gonna see like how many guys were in here, kind of like scope the joint, and then eventually leave, come back with like a better weapon or whatever. So, but both Connor and Murphy reveal themselves to Rocco, and Rocco is like, "Yeah, like you really did a really good job here." And so that leads to both Connor and Murphy just saying, "You know what? Like I think we really want to keep doing this. Like just keep on like killing people and like who are bad and like just like, just taking this on the road consistently." But it all comes down to both Connor and Murphy almost wanting to also have like Rocco kind of just tagging along with this. And but they're also to like tell him, it's like, you know what, I think like your bosses like want you dead. Like I think they were trying to like kill you off or snuff you out, because like obviously like a six shooter for nine guys, like you would have had to have perfectly killed all these guys with these one bullet, or just like line them up or something. So that is to lead them wanting to just go, okay, well, we're gonna go after Ron Jeremy's character, uh, who is to be again Lapazzi. Good grief! I'm gonna have to pause here for a second too. Let's do a reset. Oh, I also forgot to freaking mention that this movie's on Tubi. TUBI, it's a free movie and TV. Like, yeah, so uh, too late for that, but at least I mentioned it. So now they go on to go and go into this one spot where there is to be this room that is to have a woman who is to, of course, take off her clothes to like be at a room adjacent where there's going to be a guy who's jerking it, uh, to see a woman like being showcased as like this door comes up and woman is to be disrobing and the guys to get off on it. And so that leads us to have the Saints going after Lapazzi that way. By when this door comes up, they shoot him and they kill him, while eventually having some of the girls just kind of knocked over or whatever. And eventually Rocco cops a feel, but then eventually feels bad that he had done that, and he's like, "I'll give her a tip," like, and so Rocco eventually is talking with both Connor and Murphy, and they're to mention that there's two other scumbags. They're kind of waiting for their women to open up these doors. So Rocco is like, well, hey, how about I open the door and like and I'll shoot both of them. So they open the door, and so Rocco starts pelting up bullets in a very like unclean like way. And so, like this time around, I don't think we actually get both Connor and Murphy to do the traditional like back of the head kind of shot with this one. I think it's just like, hey man, like just shoot them and call it a day, kind of thing. Because Iacovetti, Iacovetti, uh, uh, Yakavetta doesn't like he kind of skirts away for a very long time in this movie. So Rocco is to mention to both of the guys that that whole like thing that they got going on with like the Spiritu Sante and the whole like kind of like thing of that whole thing. Rock was like, hey, like, is there a way for me to like eventually memorize all that and eventually like say that to somebody at some point? And both Connor and Murphy are like, yeah, no. Like, if anything, that was like a passing down like thing that like would be like a thing we learned from our father, and so like it's a family thing, it's a generational thing, and anybody who isn't exactly like family isn't going to learn this thing. So Rock was like, oh, okay, all right. So uh pushing on. So and I feel like I'm pushing on, but I also feel like I'm like forgetting something, like something that feels important. So, the whole Rocco reason for why he teamed up with both Connor and Murphy. So Connor is to, or Rocco is to go to talk with two men that are with Yakovetti or Yakoveta, and they are to mention that Rocco is going to end up having to work with somebody else because, like, yeah, like it's surprised that this guy's still alive. So Rocco is like, "Oh my god, I was set up," and so Rocco just loses his stuff and it starts killing everyone in this diner, and like runs out because every single one of them were tied to him being set up and him being killed. So he got really upset about this to when he was to make his way back to his place. Eventually he gets so like angry and upset about all this, and both Connor and Murphy are just like, hey, it looks like we got another member of the Saints on us or with us. So Rocco is to by accident like shoot his sister's cat, and like it feels like a just explosion happened, which is awful but like weird. Anyway, so Rocco is to have his sister and I guess her friend come home. And so, like, Rocco just tears both of these girls a new one, so to speak. And because Rocco's sister is to say, like, hey, where's my cat? And Rocco is to say, like, well, hey, I killed your cat. And she's like, oh my god, you killed my cat? Like, you know how precious that cat was to me. And Rocco was like, oh, really? Was it? Like, what was the name of the cat? And so if anything, like they had to like question the name of it, and it's just like, oh my god, like okay. So, but then eventually Rocco is to like lit up or kind of like get and like say some crap to the other woman too. But then eventually Rocco is to freaking just leave because he's like, ah, these women. So, but eventually that leads us to God, what is the easy transition to this? Oh, Paul is to Paul and the detectives are to go to at first the spot of the Saints going and killing Lapazzi, and then going and killing the two other people. And so Paul is so confused because he's like, you know what? Like, this shooting was like precision. Like, we have two men like firing into one person, and then all of a sudden, like, we have one guy who is like going and kind of just like shooting, obviously, like, and it's not really good shooting, it's kind of crappy shooting. But like he eventually just killed these people, but like why kill the other two people? Like, why not just kill this one guy? So like Paul was just so confused. He was just like, this makes no sense. Why are all these things so random? And then one of the detectives are to mention about some other case, which was what Rocco had done. And Paul is like, say what now? So Paul is to go back to this case at this diner to eventually see that all these deaths were to have been similar to those other deaths at that one other spot. So he's just like oh my god, like how are these all connected? Like this does not make sense. And like Paul is just so livid at this point. Like you just assume or assess he's gonna lose his freaking mind. So anyways, we have Paul uh who is to we are to find out be like gay. He is to have a boyfriend. If anything, like it just gives more like interesting things going on with Defoe's character. And so at one point we have Defoe's character getting a call to come in because there is an important case. So Defoe is to like slap consistently his guy that he's with, and because the guy wanted to cuddle, and Defoe was like, well, like we're not gonna cuddle, like no, and so like Defoe goes into a what is to be a gay bar and is to like bash like the bartender and all kinds of things because like the way he's like delivering drinks and like all kinds of stuff, and it's just like okay, this like seems just so like weird, but like I guess it's like a kind of bizarrish whatever. Anyway, so like bizarrish, but not like I don't think that's the right word. It just kind of feels like kind of like awkward, where it's like those awkward moments where it's just like Defoe is, but he's also, but like, anyways. So it is what it is with this part of this movie. So, cause what ends up happening is Rocco is to mention that there is to be a hitman of sorts that both Connor and Murphy could kill, and so what ends up happening is that Paul is to be with the Saints, and while the Saints are to actually do their crime, Paul is to just say how it all went down, and here's the thing: we have Yacovetti, who is to call upon this guy who is named Deuce or Deuce to go and get released from prison so he can go and kill the Boondock Saints. Not knowing like anything about Deuce or whatever. It's just like Deuce is just sent to go and get these guys, and like there isn't much of anything of thought after that. So like Deuce is going to intercept the Boondock Saints after they are to go and kill all these hitman slash guys that the hitman is with, because they go and they break into this home to start firing upon all these people, but the hitman isn't there, only because he's in the bathroom. The hitman is to grab this like towel rack of a thing and like pull it off this wall, and to go and like swing it at Rocco, and like so like these guys are like freaking out because of this hitman that has this like one little like uh, towel rack of a thing. So like a bar or some kind of thing. So eventually this hitman is to of course get killed in the normal way of just two bullets, good enough. So And Paul is showcasing like everything that is to happen. He is to like kneel down when Rocco is to kneel down. Uh, like if someone is to like slide or do any number of things, we have Paul who's covering the whole entire thing, like mimicking everything that all these people are doing, like shot for shot every time they are to do some kind of bullet or to be some kind of like thing. Like Paul is copying it, which I thought like, man, this scene looks awesome. Like, but also I'm just like, how exactly did they know how to like mimic everything uh like to a T to make it perfect? Plus also like I hope that like they probably had to do a lot of cuts for this scene. Like I bet this one scene took forever to do so they can nail it perfectly. So uh so after they do all of this killing, like there was one spot where Rocco had to like kill some guys underneath this like pool table. So, uh, so when both of the guys are to Rocco and both of the guys are to get out, Deuce is to be there and is like taking all these guns out of his like trench coat and just like he has like six guns that he can pull out, and he like we have Paul who's to mention that like there's a huge gunfight. Like it was an all-out gunfight. So Paul is naturally assuming that there was just a ton of guys that were all firing six different guns, and one of the detectives is just like, well, maybe it was just one person and they just had six different guns. And Paul is like, so it seems that the Saints eventually did get pretty bloody. Like Rocco was to just kind of kind of like fly off to the side to get into the bushes to like protect himself, but eventually Rocco was to also lose a finger in the process. So after they are to get kind of shot up, they spray down the place with ammonia, I guess to ruin them try to get any like DNA. So Paul is to have this one DNA specialist go and try to get this blood, and it's like, well, like I guess we can't get this blood sample because it's ruined by pneumonia. So Paul is just like, oh my god, like we can't figure out who these people are. So Paul goes off to the side of the bushes because he's just so upset, and he ends up finding a finger there, and he's like, like I'm gonna put this in my back pocket, and eventually be able to figure out who this is. So Paul is to go and to do the fingerprint of this, and to find out that it's Rocco. And Paul is just really confused that Rocco could have done this. So the Saints are going home to put an iron to their body. Any part where they were to get wounded, they're basically like having this iron being pressed onto a part of their skin, and they're trying to like bear down, like putting a like towel in their mouths and like holding on to one of the other people, like getting like strapped down or getting held down or whichever to eventually get like their wounds ironed down so that way they can just kind of uh, like not have these things bleed out, so on and so forth. So this eventually leads to Paul trying to figure out where he can find Rocco or the Saints, and Paul is to make his way like kind of through town. Rocco is to find Paul and just be like, hey man, like I think that this is the guy working on like the Saints case, so I'm gonna follow him. So Paul goes to a confessional where he is to like not be religious, but he is to just ask for advice anyways. So Rocco is to take this priest and put him into this confessional, and the priest is to force uh, Rocco is to force this priest to forcibly have Paul like team up with the saints. Just like, well, hey, maybe you need to team up with these saints to like figure this whole thing out and like and get help and so on and so forth, instead of like being their enemy. How about you be their ally? And like Paul is just like, you know what, that sounds right. Like, I think I'm gonna go and do that. So eventually, Paul is to like call the saints, and so and whatever. And so what ends up happening is that Iacovetti is to kill Rocco, and so they end up saying like the last rites to Rocco, and so Deuce is making his way into this home and also making his way to both the saints who are saying these last rites to uh to Rocco. And so all of a sudden Deuce is to start reciting the rest of the last rites to just say that, oh my god, like Deuce is the father of both Connor and Murphy, and that all of a sudden Deuce is going to like team up with his sons to go and just like take down all of these people, to kill them all off. And so that leads us to eventually have Connor, Murphy, and Deuce eventually appearing at Iacovetti's trial. Oh, also Paul came in as this like uh man dressed as a woman, let's just say, coming in here to like sneak in, and so he snuck in to take down one of the guys in this bathroom because eventually Defoe's like wig came off, and so like Defoe had to like punch this guy in the nuts several times and then freaking shot him. So like Defoe like tried to help out or whatever, but so anyways, so this leads to have Connor, Murphy, and Deuce all at this court, and so they go and they tell everybody like what they're there to do. That if anybody is to do any heinous or evil acts, that eventually like they will come back to come after them. And like they have this whole like rhyming way of approaching all this, and like it's a very long speech that they go into, but like it's their like declaration of intent, that like what they're to do and whichever. So but eventually this just leads to all three of the saints, Deuce, Connor, and Murphy, going and taking a gun uh to of course Iacovetti and shooting him. And so this eventually leads uh to I think the like I want to say that the Saints eventually get arrested, because like it just comes down to them like shooting this guy. And I think like that's the way that this movie just ends, with them like saying the last rites. I think in the sequel, I think they do get away, because what ends up happening is in the sequel is that like they're very like disheveled, and they just got into like seclusion to where like they have some like huge amount of hair, like beard and like hair and everything. And eventually they go on to like shave all of that. And so they go on because there is someone that needs their help. And so like they go and they look and they shave their hair and whatever. Like anyways. So And so that eventually leads to them like going on this other adventure, which eventually will lead them, because I know how that movie ends. That'll eventually quite possibly lead them into some hot water, but like hot water that is to lead to a Boondock Saints 3, which is to like they kind of set up a third one, but they never, I guess, did the third one. Maybe there will be a third one, but who knows? So with that said, I am going to get out of here. I kind of set up this movie as much as I could or as best as I could, but maybe there was something that slipped through the cracks. It's a dirty joke that I hope no one is just gonna try to repeat, because more than likely, like you'll probably just quickly get like a community like comment removed by YouTube and not by me, because that'll probably happen. Uh, if anything, we have one like the bartender owner who had like this uh who had this problem of just like eventually just like shouting out like cuss words and whatever, uh to where like they like started to like do it as a joke, because this guy I think has like Tourette's or whatever. Like I think that was kind of bad, but like they had fun with the guy, and the guy was also in on the joke, and like anyways. So with that said, I think I covered everything, but eventually there might have been something there that slipped through the cracks. uh like really like uh, whichever. Check this movie out if you haven't already, because you went into spoiler territory with me, so hopefully you probably maybe just wanted to hear this movie out regardless. So thank you for that. Thank you for being here, but I'm going to get out of here. Bye, buddy. Bye, buddy.